Now that we have talked about constructor functions, let's talk about a concept that goes hand in hand with them. This concept is called as prototype. In JavaScript, there are two separate things that are known by the name prototype, and hence they cause considerable unnecessary confusion. Let me clarify these for once and for all. One of them is a concept called prototype, and the second one is a keyword called prototype. So reiterating, one of them is a concept and the second one is a keyword. Now first let's talk about the concept called prototype, right? So that's the prototype concept here. The concept called prototype is what other object-oriented languages call as inheritance. So let's say you created an object by the name machine, and then you created an object by the name bicycle, which is based on the machine object, because bicycle is in the end a machine, right? So in this case, the machine object is what is called as a prototype for the bicycle object. In this relationship, the machine object is called the parent object and the bicycle object is called the child object. The relationship is called a parent-child relationship. In JavaScript, every object has a prototypal relationship with some other object. Remember, we are still talking about the concept called prototype, right? If you do not specify the parent when creating an object, JavaScript automatically assigns the newly created object a default parent. The name of this object is, interestingly, just the word object with a capital O. And now let's talk about the keyword called prototype, right? So we're talking now about the keyword prototype. Now the keyword called prototype is a keyword that can only be used in conjunction with constructor functions. The only way to create explicit parent-child relationships between two objects is by using constructor functions. Once an object has been created, its parent cannot be changed. So I hope that makes it clear. The concept called prototype says that every JavaScript object has a parent. Contrasted with the keyword called prototype is something that is available only to constructor functions and is used to establish parent-child relationships between two objects while the child object is being created. Once created, the child cannot change its parent. Let's look at some code now to solidify this concept in our head. So here between lines 70 and 20, we have a constructor function by the name object creator. It takes an argument by here, and then it assigns internally to the one element property the value saying one element, and then the argument, right? Let's modify it a little bit so it becomes a little bit clearer to read. Okay, so now we are on line 21 creating an object by the name of one object using the object creator function. So at this time, if we print the value of the one element from the one object that we just created, it should print one element followed by the parameter 1, right? However, if we try to print this another element called parent element, it should print undefined because of course the constructor function hasn't assigned anything by the name parent element within the object, right? So let's run it and see what happens. So as expected, it says one object dot one element has the value one element colon 1, and then it says one object dot parent element has the value undefined. So this is exactly as expected based on our understanding so far. Now here is the new thing that we were talking about so far, right? The prototype. So here in line number 30, which I have highlighted on the code screen, you can see the constructor function. To the constructor function, we are attaching a property called prototype, right? So this keyword has special meaning only for constructor functions, right? So if this was something else, it would just be a property that would get attached. It would have no special meaning. But in case of constructor functions, when we assign its prototype property an object called parent object, the parent object has been defined here between lines 25 and 27, and it's a very simple object with a property called parent element, and which has the value parent element. We can actually change this. Let's call this I come from, right? So we gave it a value, sorry, there we go. Parent element has a value saying I come from parent element. So now after this we assign the prototype keyword for the constructor function, this object parent object, and then we created a new object called toObject, right, using the constructor function. Now when we are trying to print the two values, right, we are printing toObject.oneElement and then toObject.parent element, right? We did not explicitly create the parent element property in the constructor function. You can see it highlighted, right? This is the constructor function body, but we did assign to the prototype property the parent object. So what this will do is it will attach all the properties that the constructor function attached, which is to say the one element, and then it will also attach all the properties to toObject, all the properties that have come from the parent object, which has been attached to the prototype of the constructor function by this statement here. So let's clear the screen here and run it. So you can see here, right, line 34 prints toObject.oneElement is one element colon 2, and then you can also see it also assigns it a parent element, right? It's which says I come from the parent element. So that's what ends up happening here. So here is now another thing, right? Let's look at this next piece of code. On line 37 we define another object by the name another parent, and on line 41 we are reassigning to the constructor function's prototype a value of the another parent. Right now we are attaching the another parent to the prototype of the constructor function. So this brings in the interesting question: what happens now? toObject was created and was attached to the parent object, right, through the prototype concept. Here you can see using these lines. Now here we reassign something to the prototype keyword of the constructor function. Would toObject actually be changed, or would it remain the same? And the answer is that once an object has been created, its prototype cannot be changed. So here reassigning something to the prototype keyword of the object creator function, which is a constructor function, does not change the objects that we have already created. We had created toObject with its one element set to the value 2 and its parent sent to this parent object, and that is not going to change. And we can ascertain that by executing the program and seeing what the value would be here. Here we are again printing the output for toObject.oneElement and then toObject.parent element, and the output here is, again you can see, toObject.oneElement is coming out to be 2, and then its parent is again printing the same thing, saying I come from parent element, right? If the switch would have happened, if suddenly toObject would have had another parent, then it should actually have printed another parent element, but it doesn't, which proves it that once created, a child cannot change its parent. Once a parent-child relationship has been created, it cannot be changed again. You do understand that though, that any new objects that are created using the new prototype, like this object creator now has a new prototype keyword assignment saying another parent. Any new objects that will be created using the constructor function now will be pointing to another parent now, right? So here this is a simple example that shows it. We assign the prototype to another parent, then we created an object called toObject which has the new parent, and then we print the values here. So this will print the values here, which says toObject.parent element is another parent element, which shows that once the constructor function changes its prototype keyword to point to another object, the new objects that are created using the constructor function point to the new parent. So now I hope it is clear in your mind what the concept called prototype is and what the keyword called prototype is, right? So now that we have this confusion sorted out, let me take a minute here to explain something else about the parent-child relationship in JavaScript. JavaScript inheritance is something what is known as prototypal inheritance. This is different from pretty much any other object-oriented language. What I mean is that in JavaScript inheritance, inheritance is a live kind of inheritance. Let me explain by contrasting it with what other object-oriented languages do. In most other object-oriented languages, when you define an inheritance relationship, you specify how a child will be attached to a parent, right? When you create a child object, the child object gets an individual copy of the parent, which is to say each child has its own copy of the parent. The children don't share their parents. That's how it works in pretty much most other object-oriented languages, right? So if there are 10 child objects created, then those 10 child objects have 10 parent objects. That's how it works in other object-oriented languages. In contrast, in JavaScript, all 10 children created from a parent share the same parent. Any changes to the parent is immediately reflected in all the children. This kind of inheritance is called as prototypal inheritance, right? That's enough talking. Let's look at some code now. So here you can see here, right? We created here you can see that the 3 object has been created and its parent has been set as the another parent, right? Now here we go ahead and change another parent element to saying I am changing, right? At this point of time, 3 object has already been created, right? And we are going and changing the parent of the 3 object, which is another parent. What ends up happening is as soon as we change this change reflects in the 3 object. So when we print the 3 objects parent element again, it prints I am changing. So you can see here 3 object dot parent element earlier was printing another parent element, and after we change the parent, now it prints 3 object dot parent element as I am changing, which says that the inheritance or the parent-child relationship between the children and parents in JavaScript is a live one. As soon as you change the parent, the change is immediately reflected in all of its children. So let me clarify this last thing, which is to say that children cannot access their parent any other way. They can access all the properties of their parents, but they cannot access the parent directly in any other way, right? The keyword called prototype is available only and only to the constructor functions. The children do not have access to this keyword. Like in fact, if you try to print here, I mean on line number 60, I'm trying to print 3 object dot prototype, right? And it ends up printing undefined. So the relationship between the child and parent is a prototypal relationship. Once created, the parent of a child cannot be changed, and the child does not have any direct access to its parent. That's all we have about prototypes in JavaScript. See you next time.